Welcome to our posts. Today, we will see stories of r/malicious compliance. You need to get your priorities straight now. I'm sending a special shout out to all teachers who are starting the new school year. I was at a training yesterday morning. 24 hours prior, my wife broke her ankle. Pretty badly, like it had to be reset. I was with her all day that day, and yesterday during the training she was recovering from her surgery while I learned how to use Excel, a math program that's pretty easy to figure out for the most part. The night before the training, my wife and I discussed the financial aspect of missing days. And though I took the day off when she broke her ankle, obviously, we both decided I would go to the aforementioned yesterday's Excel training. I get there a minute early or 14 minutes late according to the USAF and situate myself. I open up all the websites they say to, do the Padlet AI welcome page drawing they request of me, and get ahead of the program. The rest of the room is jibber-jabbing as the presenter, the other district personnel meander around the room. I see a text from my mother-in-law, and as she's at the hospital with my wife, I decide to look at it. Gina, my wife, is asking about my pay. Her phone got an alert about a payment. My Rapid card has an alert that goes to her phone, but her phone died before she could see how much. I decide to log in to my Access page to see how much and tell her whether we are covered for the deductible that they haven't collected yet. It literally took like 20 seconds to do this. And of course, this is when Miss Low Glasses decides to pretend she's my teacher. She pokes me on the shoulder repeatedly. I'm pretty sure she thinks she's tapping me, but it's uber aggressive, and says, "You need to look at the screen she's showing you." I start to comment back by saying, "Sorry, I was Jay," when she interrupted me abruptly, shouting enough for God and Satan to hear, "You need to get your priorities straight." Enter malicious compliance. I was so embarrassed and pissed at the same time. It was totally uncalled for. It was when everyone was jibber-jabbing, and it was to check on an important time-sensitive thing. It made me realize that, yes, I do need to get my priorities straight. I replied, just as loudly as I had everyone's ear now, "You know what? I do need to get my priorities straight. My wife's in the hospital. I'll be leaving now." And I walked out. The lady looking at me through her lowered glasses scoffed, and the other district personnel pulled her aside and chided her as I walked out. One of my homies yelled out, "Love you, OP. It's gonna be fine, text me," as I left. More to follow. Next story. I'm not barista material. Okay. Years ago, 1990s, I worked for an LGBTQ-themed coffee house in Hollywood, name redacted. There were two locations, one in Hollywood in an LGBTQ community center, and the second in West Hollywood. Both places were busy. My best friend Sumatra 30F and I 30F worked at both locations, and we loved it there. We made decent money, great tips, and made friends with most of our customers. One of the owners, Macchiato, didn't like female employees. He'd hire buff guys in their 20s he'd shamelessly flirt with, and then fire if they didn't reciprocate. The deal between the owners was that T ran the Hollywood location, and Macchiato ran the one in West Hollywood. Macchiato was a guy who loved to show off. He'd spend too much on supplies, expensive food, overpriced coffee beans, and would give raises to the employees he liked, the ones he hired. He'd also give his friends free coffee and sandwiches. The Hollywood location was consistently making a profit, while the West Hollywood location bled money. Eventually, the West Hollywood location closed, and the remaining employees were integrated with the employees at the Hollywood store. Macchiato started to hang around the remaining coffee house to supervise. His business partner, T, was on a 3-month vacation in Europe when all this went down. Macchiato decided to hire his new BF, Espresso M18, as our manager. Espresso didn't know how a coffee house worked, and Sumatra and I were instructed to train him. He refused to learn anything, preferring to stay in the office or leave for 3-hour lunches. Sumatra told me our days were numbered, and she was right. A week after Espresso was hired, he fired Sumatra for no reason, which left Espresso and myself as the only employees. 3 days later, as I was getting ready for a film festival the community center was hosting, Espresso showed up with my final paycheck and told me I was being let go. When I asked why, he said there were complaints from customers. I asked him, as manager, why he didn't bring this to my attention earlier. Note: we had an employee manual that clearly spelled out a robust correction policy. He scoffed at me and took off. I then called Macchiato and asked him why I was being let go. He gave me the same lame answer. I read him the correction policy from the employee handbook, which pissed him off. "It doesn't matter," Macchiato said. "You're being let go immediately. You're clearly not barista material." I took a look at the 2-block-long line of film festival attendees who were waiting for the coffeehouse to open so they could buy drinks and snacks. I asked, "Macchiato, if I'm being let go, who is going to help all the people who are lined up outside?" He said, "Oh, well, I'd appreciate it if you'd stay and finish your shift." I hung up the phone, opened the door, and told the line, "We're open. Help yourselves," and then left. I had my last paycheck, which didn't include the hours from my last shift, and since I clearly wasn't barista material, I didn't need to be there. I took my paycheck to a check cashing place instead of depositing it into my bank account. That next week, I got hired for an admin position with an accounting firm. I later found out from Sumatra that it was a good thing I cashed my paycheck instead of putting into my bank account, as the owner of the check cashing place sent over 2 big dudes and made Espresso give them all the cash from the register to cover the bad check Macchiato had written. Next story. You want to micromanage 30 people? Sir, yes sir. My girlfriend was having issues with her micromanaging boss and made me remember this orchestrated malicious compliance we did back around 2304 when I was working for a consulting company. The client we were working for was a bank that had us working from the -2 basement, which consisted on a warehouse full with ATM replacements parts and another retrofitted warehouse with desks for us. You can imagine the type. Flickering neon lights, ventilation columns. Only thing resembling a window was a poster of a window the consulting company hung up on one wall. Cell phones weren't that common then, internet was kinda on, but everything was blocked because of the bank's firewall. We had to access Google via IP address. Working there was hard. Only distraction was having a talk around the water cooler and going upstairs to get a coffee. We were like 30 people, split into 2 big teams doing COBOL and 1 smaller one doing web, .NET and whatever else somebody asked the manager to deliver. I was part of the smaller one. The client asked us to track how long it took to finish each task. This was handled by each of the 3 team leaders, and people had a little bit of leeway on how to report hours spent. So, each team member would tell team leader whenever a task was finished and how long it took. It worked pretty well because team leaders were chill and the guys were serious and didn't slack much. The manager, let's call him micromanager, since he was all about micromanaging, but also because he was short af calls me one I was kinda jack of all trades back then, and my team leader TL as in team leader, but also, he was tall af, so too long one day and says, "Look guys, I have a feeling we are not working hard enough. I need to be able to report the exact amount of time we spend on each task to the client. I want you to have some kind of software so people can input the time they spend on each thing." TL tries to explain that the current system in place works rather well and there's no need to change the status quo, that the numbers were accurate and such. Micromanager says that it's not enough, that people are wasting time and he wants accurate tracking. I was like 22-23 at that time, first job, but TL had a knack for malicious compliance. So he designed the system. It consisted on a little traffic light in the taskbar. Red meant you were assigned, yellow meant a temporary stop, green meant unassigned. In order to change from one color to the other, a pop-up appeared and you had to input the reason for the change. Then we created a web page that summarized and presented the data anonymously. It also had an export button so Micromanager could check and use it to report himself, faster than how the team leaders were doing it at least. That was Micromanager's idea. We installed this in every computer and showed how it worked to micromanager. He was happy and told us to explain the system to the team in order to start the trial run of the idea right away. So we did. TL gathered every single team member and told them that micromanager wanted an exact tracking of each one. He repeated time and time again the word exact, like probably 50 times in 5 minutes. He also said that the next day would be a trial run for the software. So, 30 team members understood right away and complied in an exact way. Here's an example on some of the things I remember. I might remember some of this ones a little embellished. It's been a while as highlights from the report with time added up after the trial day. Arrival taking coat off, no hanger available, tried to hang it on top of other coat, both fell, 5 minutes. Cough attack, had to get a glass of water, 5 minutes. Joke, morale booster, 2 minutes. Lost track of thought, realized I was looking at the poster of a window instead of a window, 3 minutes. Gone to the toilet. This was like 400 minutes or so, 30 people, 2 times in the day or so. Discussing last night's football match, 50 minutes. Air too cold, had to ask maintenance to up the temp, 4 minutes. Somebody asked temp to up the temp, now everybody is sweating, had to ask them to lower temp, 2 minutes. Inputting change of state in traffic light app, something like 2 hours in total. And the list kept going and going and going. The real data was also there, but it was practically unusable. Before leaving the office, TL called his team, and we had a really good laugh reading the list. The next day, when we arrived, micromanager called TL, told him something, and TL asked me to uninstall the traffic light app from every computer. TLDR, micromanager asks to track exact time spent on each task, even though the old way of tracking was working. We create an app and everyone goes into extremely detailed mode, so data is lost in a heap of unusable data. Micromanager backs down on request. Next story. You want me to be quiet, okay? Prepared to deal with people being scared. I don't know if it's considered malicious or not, so I apologize if it doesn't fit. I felt like it fit since I'm being a little gremlin about it. As a middle child, I grew up with oftentimes having to hide from my older siblings. As a result, I've learned how to walk quietly and not to leave a trace. I've gotten rid of this habit for the most part, except when I'm told to be quiet. I work at a warehouse store that helps the way you live. I enjoy my job because oftentimes I am successful in helping people, and I enjoy helping people. It's like a little high I enjoy every now and then. The pay is crap, so having this perk makes me stay in the job at the worst days. Now, I know I am a quiet person, so I often talk out loud. Oftentimes, it's little conversations to help me remember things and lets people know I am nearby, which often helps them find me in order to help them. I also wish to point out that I am a loud person because I lived with my grandfather for 4 years who was nearly deaf. Last week, a customer came up to me and complained I was too loud and noisy. I apologized softer and promised I will do better. I have become quieter since then, but they have gone to complain to my direct supervisor. He asked me to become less talkative while at work. You want me to be quiet, okay? The following has occurred this past week. 18 customers have complained I wasn't in my area when I was an aisle over. 16 cashier jump scares, 1 resulted in a punch in the arm. 5 supervisors screaming after a jump scare, and 25 customers jumping back. I have heard new words in Spanish, Navajo, and English that didn't know existed in real life and read only in stories like these. And yes, when I say jump scare, I mean they either scream, shouted, or cursed at me. I have started to begin conversations with, "I'm sorry about that. Is there anything I can help y'all with?" I wish to point out that I am not a small man, 5'10" inches, 300 pounds. Think of your standard bald redneck with a huge beer belly in pure black shirt and shorts in a red vest. Hopefully that paints a picture as to why I can't really be hidden in a very well-lit indoors building. Next story. How will you know if I'm working? Oh, you'll know. This happened many years ago when I was a field organizer, and I ended up with a manager who had explicitly said she didn't want to manage anybody, but a series of events meant I was her direct report. In our initial meeting, I went over everything I'd been doing up to that point, where to find my weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annual reports, how to keep track of where I'd be, and how to give me feedback between our monthly check-ins. She was not used to working with field organizers and was shocked that I wasn't going to be in the office except for meetings and to turn in my reports. And it's fine to not know things. But then she went and said, "If you're not in the office where I can see you, how will I know you're working? You could be doing anything you want and I'd never know." Over and above what kinds of assumptions that makes about my character. Whether or not someone looks like they're working is a terrible metric for measuring what work is actually getting done. But I kept that to myself. Rather innocently, I offered to have my task tracking app send her an email whenever I accomplished a task. She agreed. The thing about me is I am a fast worker. I always have been. It's been a bone of contention with people who I work with. I create backlogs. I make other people feel weird about how much they do in a day. I used to get upset about this and wish everybody was as fast as me. By this time in my career, though, I learned to keep it to myself and spend some portion of my day pacing myself with others, or to find jobs where my pace wasn't that strange. This job was the latter. We were doing underfunded community-driven work where the failure or success of a project sometimes meant that the people we served couldn't pay their rent or afford food, so I was blazingly fast. After 3 days of hundreds of emails a day notifying her the second I completed a task, my boss decided that she actually didn't need to know whether I was working or not. We actually became good friends after that because we realized we had a lot in common and we teamed up against the other bosses who kept making crappy decisions and putting us in bad places because they knew we were both competent enough to solve their problems for them. Neither of us work there anymore. We've moved on to much better things, but we're still friends today. Next story. Short-staffed? No problem. I work for a visitor attraction in London. Generally, we are out on the floor answering questions, etc. We had a dedicated team that worked in the control room, usually supervisors or those that wanted to become supervisors. Normally 1 or 2 people in the control room. They were never ever on the floor if they could help it. They watched the CCTV and controlled the breaks, lunches, etc. For instance, if a visitor sets off an alarm, they would call us and we would investigate the alarm. Management decided to pull the supervisors out onto the floor and train floor personnel to be in the control room. Good idea on paper, but in practice, supervisors didn't want to go on the floor, and those on the floor didn't want to go into the control room. Some of us already worked in the control room as we relieved them for breaks, lunches, etc. Basically, if you were in the control room, you stayed in there. First training week went something like this. Someone that knew the control room training 3 or 4 of the floor people. Needless to say, that put us short-staffed on the floor and management had to go on the floor to cover. As how hard could it be? It will only be a week, then I can go back to my cushy desk job. First day I was training 3 or 4 floor staff and management supervisors were on the floor. Management told me treat them like normal floor staff. Okay, no problem. I asked everyone that I was training normal floor staff. We all got big smiles on our faces. Not even 10 minutes goes by and radio call. Can one of you bring the keys for the front door so we can let the public in? It's a 5 minutes walk from control to the front door. I radio one of the management on the floor. Come to control and pick up the keys and take to front door. I get a phone call, just have so and so bring them over. There's 4 of you in there. As per procedure, nobody is allowed out of control room. Management take 5 minutes to get to control and then take the keys over to front door. So we are late opening. Next radio call. Which key is it? It's number Roman 20? They open the doors. Alarm goes off. Control, why did alarm go off? You need to call control to let us know exactly when to take alarm off. Procedure. All of this is written down. Procedures must be followed. Now that the public is in, alarms start going off for various reasons. The public loves going through doors that say door is alarmed. Normal stuff. I start radio calls to management on the floor. Charlie 3 go to door X. Charlie 3 go to door X, etc., etc. Delta 4 relieve Charlie 3 for their lunch. Lunchtime. I get phone calls from people who haven't been relieved for their lunch on time. Management hasn't figured out that travel time between your post and the break area is not included in your lunch break. If you have an hour lunch and it takes you 10 minutes walking time to get there, then basically your lunch is 40 minutes. 10 minutes to go from your post to break room and 10 minutes to go back to post. Normal control room staff knew this and would start lunches early to give everyone as much as possible a full lunch. More radio calls. Charlie 3, can you check the toilet? Report of water on the floor. Charlie 3, can you go to X? Visitor wants to use a voucher. Actually, Charlie 3 go to door X, but I'm with a visitor. Doors take priority. Charlie 3 inches. For the rest of the day, we ran management crazy. Everything in the procedures was adhered to. Count the empty spaces in the car park. Check locks on the emergency gates. Check toilets, men's and women's, to see if they need to be refilled with toilet paper. Look for lights out, fill in your task book, etc. Next day, needless to say, I wasn't in the control room. Didn't matter. The tone was set. Didn't matter who was in there. The rest of the week went by the same. Everyone that followed me ran management nuts. Management, to their credit, changed some things after that. Black sneakers can now be worn. More break rooms closer to posts have been opened. Procedures have been loosened up. Control people are back in control and floor people are on the floor. Everyone is now trained in the control room, but they only have to work it if they want. Still was a glorious week. Next story. No externals without permission. Sure. Background. I work in security and our company has many different clients and no fixed posts, so I jump from site to site. The site in question client is one of the more complicated sites for us and has an awful work atmosphere. We man the gates and next to the normal truck traffic. There are also multiple visitors coming, some of them so often you basically know them by name, and we just open the gate for them because they are here every day. One of the middle managers, Power from client, is one of those people that think they are the most important person in the world as soon as they get a little bit of power. For example, when Power got into middle management. Now the story. Power decided that this way everybody could just come and go in. So we got the new order to not let anyone external in without getting the okay from the person responsible for them. Every external, you say? Okie dokie. This alone made DHL, UPS and so on not happy, since we stopped them now and first called the people who take the packages from them, making them also really annoyed. It happened. Some very important people came for an appointment with Power first thing in the morning. Something much money was hanging on. The good girl I am, I tried calling Power for 15 minutes. No answer. Welp, guess I can't reach Power. Means I can't let the very important people in. I told them. So sorry. Obviously they were not amused, but my idea that they could bill client for their wasted time made them less unamused. Power came 15 minutes later. His car had issues. He told me that he has a very important meeting, and if very important people come, they can go directly to him. I then told him the sad news that they were here already, and I tried to call Power for 15 minutes. But after I couldn't reach him, I did send them away as our new instructions demand me to do. The instructions were very quickly withdrawn to the earlier system, where we could let people in if we know who they are without needing to ask first. I hope you guys like this video. If you did, make sure like, comment, share, and subscribe the channel our posts.